And then also with any predicted cuts, which I wish wasn't the case, but with given predicted cuts at the state and federal level, this collaboration with the hub and our community is ever the more paramount to make sure that we can continue to provide these resources to our families, because this is a family and they live in my community. They live down the street from me, and I want to support them. And I love doing this partnership with our hub. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica and Jordan. Sue, I'd like to bring Blue Mountain next and then have council hold their questions to the end. Does that work, or do you want to do questions?
I have to ask you.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Jessica, the family, the parents you just mentioned, living in their car and delivering a baby in a week, is housing one of the services that you're connected to? I don't think I see them on the work group.
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. It absolutely is. And so we partner with the Maslow Project here in Southern Oregon to help teens who are navigating houselessness, and also through our Siskiyou Community Health at FQHC, they also help navigate through the various resources that exist to help pay the first and last month's rent, navigate through the HUD housing with the voucher, all of those things that I don't know, but they do. And so the housing is part of that partnership.
So
that's my goal. I got to get them housed. I got to get them out of their car. It's getting hot. And they shouldn't be in a car with a baby. A baby should be in a car.
Thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Gabby. I just couldn't.
No, good question. Thank you, Sue. Appreciate that. So, council, then I want to introduce the presenters here from Blue Mountain Early Learning Hub. Erin Farsh, she's the Blue Mountain Early Learning Hub Operations Coordinator at the Intermountain Education Service District. Laura Arriola, the Blue Mountain Early Learning Hub Child and Family Services Coordinator. And Carly Wallace is joining them as well. She's the Resource Family Retention and Recruitment Champion over at ODHS. Same questions, Erin and Lara and Carly, really kind of just hoping for you all to share how you've approached developing this partnership, where it started, how it looks like today, and sharing any successes. And then Jessica, Renee, and Jordan, hoping you all can stay on, and then we'll open it up for Q&A once we get through with the presentation. Give me one quick sec. I'll pull up your slides. Okay.
All right, thank you for having us. I'm going to pass it over to Carly to start. So Gabby, if you want to go to the next slide, that'd be great.
Yes, of course.
Hi, my name is Carly Wallace, and I work for ODHS Child Welfare. And my role is the Resource Family, which is a foster family. Oregon renamed our foster families to Resource Parents back in 2021 to show the vital resource that they serve to our communities. So you'll hear folks use it interchangeably, but Resource Parent is a foster parent. So I am the Resource Family Retention and Recruitment Champion for the area of Umatilla, Morrow, Union, Baker, and Wallowa counties. And the role that I am in is to work on increasing retention and recruitment of foster and respite providers in our area. And part of that is setting goals with our local district around what we can do as staff, what we can do with partners, just in general to increase the retention efforts. We know that fostering is really difficult, especially if there's lacking supports. So we really try to put some focus on that. And then, of course, recruitment too, to be able to recruit new families and match the children that are entering foster care in our area. Part of the retention efforts are being able to access tools and resources, because out here in Eastern Oregon, they tend to be few and far between. So really my role has been to try and bridge that gap between our foster care system and our community. I really try to spend a lot of time working with our partners and talking about what does foster care look like in our area specifically, and what are the needs, and helping folks understand that it's not an all or nothing system. A lot of the times we find that folks will come to us when we're recruiting and things and say, well, I can't foster, so there's not much I can do. And there really is a lot of things that we can do, and it would in turn help with the retention. And so do a lot of work around that and how we can talk about how our community can support the children and families that are involved and be able to help us with those retention efforts. And part of the Child Welfare Division, we have developed a vision for transformation. And just a brief piece of this that I wanted to add into our talk today, there's a lot more guiding principles, but one of the things that we did add into that vision for transformation is that we, ODHS Child Welfare, believe that communities often already have that wisdom and the assets to provide safe, stable, and healthy lives for their children. And so we as Child Welfare really need to work on partnering, listening, and lifting up the community voices and their decision-making powers. And that really will help build on existing resources that are ones that are already here. It creates pathways to new resources and then promotes community interdependence rather than a system of dependence. And Gabby, I'll have you go ahead and go to the next slide.
So the hub and ODHS has been working together for a while. One of the ways we have regular communication is through our governance board. We have a representative from Child Welfare on our board, and we have other ODH members who participate in our governance meetings. We also have general collaboration across multiple areas. So we have early childhood partnership teams across all 3 of our counties where we have DHS members who participate. We have CCO meetings where we all come together and we collaborate with ODHS there. We work with, well, recently I attended the CQI meetings, the continuous quality improvement meetings for both of our districts. And so we have regular collaborations all the time with DHS, but specifically, we've recently started to collaborate more focused on our relationship with supporting resource families. And so in true fashion of the rural area, Carly and I go back before our current positions. And so currently Laura works with UMHS, but Carly and I also used to work at UMHS. And that's where we actually developed our working relationship. We were colleagues and our paths crossed multiple times. And so when we both came to our new positions, like we weren't strangers. And that's how it is in rural areas. A lot of times our relationships with the people we work with across sectors, we know them from previous jobs, from being in the community. So no one's really a true stranger.
Yeah, and just to add to that, like Erin said, being that we weren't strangers, when I walked into my role through ODHS, I already knew where to go, not only with Erin in the hub, but other community resources, my connections with Head Start and other community areas. But I had walked into my role and I was talking to our leadership and I was talking to our local resource parents about what do you need for retention? What are things looking like? And that's when I knew that Erin was going to be my go-to person to see if some of these needs could get met through community resources that the hub already had. And Gabby, I'll have you go to the next slide.
So how does this collaboration grow? Well, collaboration, it just breeds more collaboration. So Carly and I, we started talking, and one of the things, and I will say this is during COVID, one of the things we talked about was how do we support parent education, especially during COVID when everything was shut down, people felt more isolated, you're seeing more behaviors. So we talked about like, how does that look and how does that work in a rural area? It's hard sometimes to have trainings, especially in person during COVID was hard, but then even across the large span of geography that we have to cover. And so one of the things we looked at was how do we do this virtually? Can we do this? This is, at the beginning of COVID, virtual technology was improving. Zoom was becoming this great tool to use. And so we said, let's try that. Let's see if we can do parent ed through Zoom. So we worked with Conscious Discipline to provide a trainer. We were very intentional about the curriculum, but then also the trainer. So the trainer we got was somebody who had been a resource parent themselves. And so they understood the unique challenges and difficulties that come with operating inside a system and with children who have experienced being removed from their primary home. And so what we found from that experience was that it did work. And there were a lot of benefits that some families expressed, that they could attend the class while traveling to take their kid to visitation or to an appointment. They could attend class while cooking dinner. They didn't have to uproot their whole day. And we were able to offer the class we ended up doing it across like 5 counties. So we had people who attended who otherwise would have had to travel over an hour to come to a class. So we found that that was a really great way and to offer parent ed. And then we have been in conversation since then about trying to find new ways to meet the needs of families now that COVID is over and we can meet in person again. Another collaboration that we came up with was, how do we support children's big social emotional needs, knowing that when children are removed from their primary caregivers, there is a gap. These children are attached to their parents, and when they're removed, there is a vacancy inside them of wanting to connect to that person. And we see this often in behaviors. And resource parents don't always have the skills or the knowledge of how do we help children process these feelings and move through them. So one of the things we thought was, like, how do we create a tool for the families to use that allows the child to feel connected to their parent, and also a tool to help them regulate. And we learned about, through another program that we partner with, it's a Build-A-Bear type of experience. It's not the actual Build-A-Bear. It's called Noah's Ark, and it comes with a little kit, and so that you can do it. And so we partnered with Carly, and she's working with the family coaches and child welfare office to help in visitations and to work with families. So when children visit with their biological parent, they're able to create a stuffed animal, and has a little star that goes inside. And so it has a connection to their biological family. And then when they go back to their resource parent, that bear goes with them, or whatever animal they choose. There's some really cute animals, but that goes back with the child. And there's a letter that goes home to the resource parent, explaining how to use this as a tool to really allow the child to feel connected to home, and not have to feel isolated and alone from their parent, and how to use it as a tool appropriately for that purpose. And so those are some of the things that have come out of this collaboration. And I'm going to let Carly talk a little bit more about how we've expanded these collaborations since then.
Yeah, so we got started with those efforts, and one day Aaron and I were at the warehouse and we were stocking up on our Build-A-Bear stuff, and we were talking about the safety closet that the hub also offers to our community, and something that ODHS utilizes, and then this type of activities that we've been doing. And I was expressing my want and need that I wish there was just one way that we could streamline all of this, because we do have some other great community partners in the area that can provide tangible goods and things of that nature. And sometimes what we would run into is people would come to me and say, "Hey, I need something tangible," and I would reach out to multiple partners and they would all be working on it, and then we'd get more than one. And so we were trying to find a way to streamline these efforts, so we weren't having all these people work on one thing. So we have now developed a resource family support team, and that has been in partnership with all of our local partners. So the hub, Every Child Oregon, locally we have Sweet Potatoes Closet, and we have Hands and Feet Inc. So all of these different partners come together monthly, and we talk about goals that we have around work with resource families, and how can we do that in our community with what we have already, and maybe what kind of new initiatives can we come up with. And it has really expanded some of the work that we can do, both around recruitment and retention. Just having not only new ideas from folks who don't work from DHS, it's so great to have a new perspective, but also just having the different resources and connections. And because as Aaron talked about earlier, being in Eastern Oregon, a lot of us have connections. So not only could it be just connections that your workplace can offer, but it could be that, hey, I know somebody, let me reach out. So this team gathers monthly with all of our partners, and we just talk about those barriers and talk about those things that we would really like to see get going. And we set goals as a group, and break out into smaller teams to work on those type of things. So having the hub involved in that has been extremely beneficial. And Gabby, I'll have you go to the next slide, please. So as far as how things are working out so far, this has increased the resources available to families and children significantly. For us working with the hub, as Aaron talked about, we've been able to offer a variety of parent education opportunities. We've been able to do the Build-A-Bear activity and keep our visit rooms stocked up with those. And it's so fun to see how excited the children get when they know that that's an option. We had one child who did one with his mom, and then after he's like, "Can I do one for my brother who isn't in the same home, you know, and can I do one for this?" So it's really nice to know that that was something that he really was drawn to and felt like he could do with some of his other family members that maybe he isn't residing with currently. And then it has also opened the door for more collaboration within our other partners, but also some of the other things that the hub offers, as far as there's grants. We've talked about working with some of our partners to get some grants for some safety items specifically for certifying our relatives, that maybe they wouldn't be able to access otherwise. And we, as ODHS, we require when we certify them. And our number one goal is to keep children with their family if at all possible. So we don't want those type of things to be a barrier if at all possible. And then in addition, a lot of this is just knowing where and how to connect families to resources. Locally, we have been having conversations with our resource families about the preschool promise options that are available to children through the hub, and how can we get them connected to that so they could take, have that opportunity available to those children that they may not have otherwise. And once again, like I said, has really connected us with each other. So having every child involved. And then if you're not familiar, GOBI, Greater Oregon Behavioral Health, they have therapeutic foster care. So they have also been joining us. And not only does this support ODHS's efforts in recruiting and retaining our foster parents, but it also helps GOBI's efforts in doing that locally as well. And in turn, they continue to serve Oregon's children. And I think overall, this does give us that clear community vision, really be able to tell folks what our goals and priorities are. Because once again, folks a lot of time say, I can't foster, so I can't help. And this helps us be able to step forward and say, these are the things that we're trying to do. In what capacity do you think you could help us with these efforts? So overall, that's really how it's been. It's been a huge, tremendous help with ODHS, and it really has made things a lot more streamlined and connected overall. Aaron, do you have anything you want to add that maybe I missed?
Nope, that's it. You did it.
Thank you, Carly and Aaron. And I think that was your last slide with just contact info. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for questions, comments from council for all of our panelists. Yeah, Robin.
Thank you for that presentation, really inspiring. I love hearing the unique collaborations that you have there. I was listening for Every Child, so it sounds like the state Every Child program is connected, which is awesome. I assume that means you don't have a local Every Child affiliate, and I was curious about that. That's right. Handshaking.
Yeah, that is correct. Okay. Unfortunately, we do not have a local Every Child affiliate, so we work with their executive director team, and they're the ones that have been partnering with our efforts out here and doing what they can to support us from a distance.
That's great to hear. And the other thing I was listening for with all the parent education is a parenting education hub, which I know that Union Baker, Wallowa, and Malheur would be building healthy families, so there might be that overlap with the union. But I'll just curious how the parenting hub in your regions is connected to any of that work. Is there any support and overlap and connections?
Yeah, so we, one of the projects that, so when Carly was talking about our big collaborative group and goals, one of our projects in that bigger goal is working with our OPEC hub in creating a master list of who can be parent ed trainers and what curriculums can they offer, and trying to create that bigger regional support network of who can help support with parent ed when we need it and with what, programs can they offer. So we are in collaboration work with our OPEC hub, and they are part of that bigger group that meets.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, Peter.
Thanks. Hey, Jordan. Hey, Jessica. Hey, Renee. Good to see you. Hey, I was wondering, is the Family Nurturing Center, it's a relief nursery, is Family Nurturing Center involved with the teen parent group? I was just wondering whether accessing their programs is part of the collaboration.
Not at the moment. I believe it was a staff capacity issue. They had been sitting on in the work group for a long time, and then staff capacity just didn't allow them to attend recently.
Gotcha. Well, they have their office in Grants Pass, and I don't know whether the teen parent that Jessica's working with now, if they've been guided to Family Nurturing Center, they have the support programs, just parent-to-parent support programs, but they also have basic needs that they can help with.
We're going to pass that right on along, and hopefully their caseworker with Siskiyou Community Health will also help connect that, but I will do that, Peter. Thank you, friend.
You bet.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So Jessica, I'm wondering, who in the school district needed to get on board to make this collaboration work? Was it a superintendent or a principal or teachers, or how? So what are the politics within the district?
There really wasn't any politics to overcome at all. It was just one person thought someone else was doing it. It was just clear communication, truly. There was no barrier. There was no hurdle. I just thought that another person in our district office was supporting teen parents, and they thought that I was. And so when we really just sat down and said, who actually is, we realized it was minimal at best, just our district nurse who was making some phone calls. And so it really most naturally fits in my world of supporting our McKinney-Vento students and also our houseless students. And I have a staff that is passionate about it, and Amber loves to come to the meetings and help attend when I can't with Jordan. And so now it's just a clear defined role with one communication, one point of contact, and that has made all the difference. So our schools aren't confused. Our administrators, our counselors, our mental health coordinators, they aren't confused. It's just now a simple process. You just tell us and we'll take it from there. And I think that's just made all the difference.
I hope there's a system within the school district system for you to share this information with others, especially small school districts that probably have a similar capacity problem and communication challenges.
100% of the districts I talk to have the same problem. And so it's really connecting them with what I've learned. Do you have a system? And is it working or is it broken? Well, we didn't have a system, so therefore it was broken. And so I've talked with many of my fellow colleagues who are the district homeless liaison and resource parent liaison. And that seems to be the most logical starting point for districts of how to connect. And I always say, connect with your hub, connect with your Head Start, connect with Early Head Start, like all your resources in the community, specifically starting with the hub. And so that's the greatest part about our Southern Oregon Early Learning Hub. They connect all of our districts together. So I can just say, give Jordan a call and she'll help your district kind of figure out, and come join in our meetings. That's where I learn all the stuff. Come learn about what's in our community and the resources.
Awesome, awesome. Chelsea Bunch, who is with the state's Housing Department, Housing Community Services, is here. And Chelsea joins us many, many times. She's a huge partner of ours. But I think, you know, once again, the connection to housing, which is so foundational for having young children and their families thrive and be successful. This conversation today just once again really emphasizes that having housing at those tables is essential. And Chelsea's been a real leader in trying to do some co-location of early childhood and supportive housing projects. And Chelsea's boss, who's out of town, but Andrea Bell is also a huge advocate of connecting housing to early childhood and young children. So it's exciting to see these connections being made, Chelsea.
Maybe I'll just tack on to that, and I'm sorry, we're all dealing with a lot of things in a session, so appreciate your patience with me. But I feel I appreciate that. I remember when I first started with OHCF, one of the first partnerships that I was actually brought in to help support and develop with our agency was with Early Learning Hubs. And so I spent the first probably year or so in this role, well, not in this role, but in my previous role with our agency, going out to meet as many Early Learning Hubs, hub directors as possible. And that was really the foundation for how we got to co-location, was coming out and spending time with hub directors and really hearing what the needs were. So I think that just continues to reinforce the important work that you all do as hubs. I mean, you are literally doing what I think the word hub, the meaning of what a hub really does is being that prime place of contact for so many things. And so I think that was the entryway for what is now co-location, but hopefully we'll get bigger and that we can get more resources for over time. So I just really appreciate that. I appreciate you all's continued partnership. It's good to, and I feel like I think Jillian Westenberg was one of the folks that I had a chance to meet with very, very early on. This was like years ago, but so it's great to see the evolution of this together.
Thanks.
Yeah, okay. For Kaylee and Laura, I know at least in our county, recruitment and retention of foster parents is a big deal. And I can imagine in a more rural setting like you are, that's really a big deal. Has your program been in existence long enough that you have seen an increase in the numbers? Because that's such a valuable resource for these kids that have experienced trauma. And again, a difficult job for those resource parents that are given children that have a trauma background.
Yeah, I love that question. I would say that we're still getting off the ground on it. However, in the last few months that we have been working, I don't know if it's because it's hard to say if it's because of our efforts or what it is, but I know that we right now, the number may sound small because you got to remember we're Eastern Oregon. So right now we have about 5 to 6 general applicant foster families in the works, which is great for our area. Just to give you kind of a size overview for us, in Umatilla and Morrow County, we have approximately 90 resource parents, and majority of those are relative or child specific. So you're going to be looking at about only 20 that are general applicants, meaning that they'll take a child that they didn't know previously to them being in foster care. So having 5 or 6 people currently in the works is a big number for us, just given our population and geographical location. So I think that in ways our efforts definitely are helping. It's just hard to say yet, being so early into it, if it's because it's of that specifically.
Yeah, I think that's a success. And even if you're not necessarily recruiting sort of general applicants, if you're supporting those kinship families that are doing foster care, that's a huge deal too.
Absolutely. And we, out in this area, we are a pilot site for the new relative pathway program that ODHS is implementing, which essentially means that we are now certifying relatives differently than we used to. We used to certify them the same as general applicants. And now we're doing certification a little bit differently and really putting a focus on how can we support relatives in caring for children that they likely have already been caring for. And it really, really revolves around, what kind of education might they need, what kind of tangible goods might they need, what other kind of supports within our community could we be giving them to help support them in caring for their children. So this collaboration will help with those kinship placements as well, and being able to support that and keep children with their families.
Thanks for that work.
Renee, I saw that you had your hand up before I went to Peg. Anything to add?
Well, the moment kind of passed, so I don't necessarily want to go backward unless you want me to.
Yeah. Why not? You had your hand up.
Well, yeah. I think that Jessica's story about the family living in the car was really compelling for the council. And I just want to really emphasize that that's just one family, that there are hundreds of families in similar situations in our region, and then certainly across the state. And there is it's challenging, not just because of the lack of resources for housing, but also because young parents are leery of help from adults. Many of the teen parent population have very limited healthy relationships, and they have learned that adults aren't necessarily trustworthy sources. And sometimes it's been re-emphasized through our partner organizations. They go through the door and they are not welcomed, and that sense of relationship isn't necessarily cultivated, and they'll check out. We had a partner in who was the teen parent coordinator at a local high school in Medford School District for 20 years. And she was a trusted resource, and the teen parents would go to her for when they had a need, when they didn't know where else to go. Her position was eliminated during COVID. And since then, there have been, I think the last count was 4 different people in that position getting assigned the teen parents, not because they had a desire necessarily, not because they had a skill set. It was just an assignment. And they have not had the same engagement with teen parents. And so I just want to, maybe it's obvious, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to state that with teen parents, like all of us, it's all about the relationships, and this 2-generation opportunity that we have to really make a difference. It's going to start with a trusting relationship, and that takes time. And so one of the things that I really love about these collaborations is that we're building trust with each other. And if Jessica fosters trust with a teen parent, and Jessica says, teen parent, I have this partner that I trust. Will you meet with them? They're more likely to do it than just getting a cold referral. And so I'm not sure that I've highlighted anything anyone didn't already know, but I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to just emphasize the delicacy and the nuance that is necessary when supporting our young parents. And also noting that nothing magical happens when a parent turns 20. They still need all of those supports. They still might lack all of that social connection. So that was my 2 cents. Thanks, Gabby.
Thanks, Renee. I have one too. One, I want to just say hi to Jessica. Hello. Only because her little brother and I are college roommates. So it was fun to see her name on the agenda. But I think this question maybe is for Jordan. I know I read the report that you provided, wonderful stuff. One of the things I think you highlighted was some of these teens are running into restrictions in terms of them being under 18. Is there a feedback loop that's going to ODHS and some of these other agencies how does that feedback getting back to those agencies who have those policy restrictions? Is that an area that we could help elevate some of those barriers that teens are running into with programs?
Yeah, I can touch briefly on that. At least we do have local ODHS partners that sit in the work group, and they have teen parents on their caseload. And so they were able to take some of that information back. But as far as like elevating it above that to policy changes, would be open to exploring what supports are available. I know a couple of teens mentioned it really depended on the client or the staff that they received when they walk in the door on what services they received. Some were willing to kind of walk that line and say, maybe you qualify as homeless. We can help you get this resource so that you qualify for support, or maybe you're living with a family member. This isn't going to work for you. So they were really able to meet the teen where they were at and find what was going to be the best support for them, which really just depends on who you meet in the day you walk in the DHS office.
Great. Interesting. I don't like that answer. I mean, we were just saying, I think that's frustrating to hear. And an area that maybe we can elevate with some of our colleagues on the council about.
If I were you, I'd talk to Peter Buckley and I would get on it. We saw what you did at the retreat last time. You can do it.
Just send me a note.
No, seriously, it may be a role that the council can help with as these barriers are identified. Yeah, all around the table have connections.
Any other questions or comments?
Can I ask a curious question?
Yeah.
Maybe just for the collective in the room. Is there a regular like hub where all the hubs come together, like a hub collaborative?
There's a hub director meeting that Delcos and the Hub Association, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, I would, I just hearing this conversation, it makes me think about, we're in the middle of our long session and a couple more days left to go. And just thinking about the breadth of resources that are coming in, and like where is the opportunity for our agencies to be able to share with hubs, like what has the state received, and what is available and what is not, and then what's the avenue by which those resources get deployed in communities, because it looks a little different for all of our agencies, right? Like as our housing agency, we don't actually have regional offices. We serve the whole state, but we don't have folks in every single county, the way that DHS is set up. But we have resources that flow through, to the community action agencies and to, the various organizations. And so how do we ensure, I'm just thinking about the raise up our RUAC team, like where is there opportunity for us
I wrote down, how do we do state agency updates
Yeah.
with the hubs using Raise Up Oregon?
Yeah.
Our implementation team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and I think, maybe the initial go, right, is a high level kind of overview of here's like what the breadth of the resources that states have received, right? And then the opportunity for each individual agency to say, okay, so this bulk of these resources, right? Like for us, for instance, if we have rental assistance dollars available, like what does that look like in said county?
Yeah.
And like who would you go to, right? To access those resources, just to help start to make some of those connections, because I think that that's just going to be more important coming years in this shifting environment. I think we're gonna have to be a little bit more proactive about how we, and I mean when I say we, meaning our agencies, not not necessarily you all, but we got to be a little bit more proactive about how we ensure that communities understand what resources are available.
Yeah. I like that you called that out, Chelsea, because too, I don't know if you recall, but it actually came up during the earlier Hub Director call where council joined. It came up as how can we kind of share resources with hubs that we're getting from other agencies, because they are the cross system, partners. So more to come, I hope.
Well, and I just want to remind the council once again that RUIAC, Raise Up Oregon Agency Implementation.
Coordination.
Implementation team.
David made
Anyway, RUIAC, we have two RUIAC, well, three RUIAC members here. Chelsea Wilcox, who's our OHA hero, and two other people, and Carrie and Gabby. Oh, and Becky's on RUIAC. Okay, so we have a lot of RUIAC people here. I think increasingly the connections between the council and RUIAC are going to just be critical. So nice to have so many of you here. And you all on this call will benefit as the council works with RUIAC to try to do some of these, top, bottom, top communications. So thanks for all the work you're doing.
Thank you all so much for joining and participating. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks for the work you're doing around the state. You guys are amazing. If you have lucky families and children.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for your time. Bye, Liz.
Bye. Her brother was texting me saying, "Is my sister on?" I was like, "What's happening?"
When your worlds go.
Exactly.
I must say that's a part of the rural scenario. Rural environment is everybody knows everybody. There must be a downside.
Well, there is definitely a downside, but the positive side is that you always know somebody and you probably serve on the same committee as about, 6 other people.
All right. Yeah. Great comment, Mary. We're really bringing it down to the ground level. It's true. It is true. Oh, my goodness. All right. Our panels are done and we are right on time. So thank you to Gabby and Harriet, who couldn't be with us today, for organizing those panels. Wow. I mean, they were great. Really.
And Harriet is on the call. I'm sure she's having a camera issue, so not her own fault, but just Teams, but she is on the call. So just letting you know that she can hear.
Great. Nice to have you on the call, Harriet. And I know that Nancy and Maria played a huge role also in helping to, identify and then coordinate the hub presentations. But really well done. We all should be encouraged with so much discouraging news out there. I think this one is well timed to see positive things happening. Well done, you guys. All right, now for the authority that this council has. Drum roll. I'm saying we have responsibility and no authority. This is our moment. Rulemaking. So are we starting with, what are we starting with?
Yeah, we are starting with the hubs, and I think Maria and Nancy are on the call.
Awesome.
And Maria and Nancy, not sure if you both just want to quickly just introduce yourselves, but I think everyone knows who they are, right? And
Maybe not.
coordinators. Okay, yeah, let's take a second to just introduce yourself for the council.
Great, I can get, yeah. Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Nancy Hout, Early Learning Hub Coordinator with DELC. I'm so happy to be here.
And I'm Maria Mendoza, also the Early Learning Hub Coordinator here with DELC, and also excited to be here.
Great, thank you. And I will go ahead and get us started, and you guys can take it away.
Great, thank you. Here we go. So we wanted to start the presentation by emphasizing that the hub rulemaking has been grounded in a 12-month engagement process led by the BUILD initiative, and it brought together leadership from Early Learning Hubs, DELC, and the Early Learning Council. So this This was a collaborative process, and it identified the statewide infrastructure that's needed to support the hub vision. And as Becky mentioned earlier today, the build report, Getting Aligned, defining the shared vision and functions of Oregon's regional early learning hubs, summarizes this engagement. Next slide. So the build process highlighted the need for a more robust rule set, one that modernizes and clarifies and enhances the framework governing early learning hubs to reflect, current best practice, legislative mandates, and operational realities. And I'll pass it along to Maria.
Thank you, Nancy. Next slide, please. So here, this slide outlines the rulemaking work and distinguishes really between the updates to current rules and then the newly proposed rules. For updates to current rules, those include purpose and scope, definitions, early learning hub functions, and administration of early learning kindergarten readiness and partnership and innovation program. The proposed new rules include administration, backbone entity structure, early learning hub governance structure, early learning hub director role, and data collection and reporting. Next slide, please. So here we have a high-level overview of the timeline for our rulemaking process, where we began with the DELC Hub Director engagement back in January 2024. February through May is where we had the core of our engagement with listening sessions, RAC meetings, and public feedback opportunities. In March, we presented the draft content to you all, and now here we are in June. We're back to share updates and walk through the proposed rules. If the rules are adopted, they will go into effect in October. Next slide, please. We would love to take a moment to really highlight the engagement process that got us to this point. As we've noted, this process really started over a year and a half ago and has really been rooted in collaboration, which focused engagement by the BUILD initiative in partnership with DELC, Hub Directors, and the Early Learning Council. Together, key questions and system tensions that needed to be addressed were identified, and we also saw the creation and the release of the All Hub Shared document last June. This process in the document helped us lay the foundation for the work ahead, including rulemaking. We intentionally really took our time to gather input from our early learning hub systems through key engagement opportunities like the Hub Director and backbone listening sessions. We really recognized the importance of listening closely to ensure we could strike a balance and that reflected the realities and the needs that were needed to do this work. When it came time for the Rules Advisory Committee, we were so thrilled to see such engagement. We had 63 applicants, which were strong and diverse applicant pool, and RACs are typically capped at 15 members, but we were actually able to expand the membership to 20 to really reflect the level of interest and ensure that more voices were being heard. And we were thrilled to say that with that representation, we were able to include all but 2 hub regions, which were regions that did not submit applications through the recruitment process. The group met 3 times and offered thoughtful feedback that directly shaped the rules that we're bringing before you today. Nancy?
So in addition to RAC feedback, we also provided additional opportunities for even more feedback, and that included 2 public feedback sessions, a public hearing, and then we also learned a lot from some pretty robust internal and external public feedback, including backbone engagement and governance council engagement through hub directors. As far as next steps, what we found is that so much of the feedback will continue to inform the scope of work in our grant agreements and other guiding documents. In addition, the rules will go into effect October 1, 2025, which aligns with our Early Learning Hub grant agreement. Next slide.
So here we have our RAC participants, again, really noting the diverse and well-rounded group that brought thoughtful feedback, and it was really beneficial to our process. We had strong representation across sectors, which included health, higher ed, K-12, numerous early learning and care representatives, and also union representatives. We also had participants from parent advisory councils, governance councils, early learning council, thank you, Ruby, and participants who brought a tribal lens to the rule set and hub and backbone leadership. We think that this composition really ensured that the draft rules were able to be shaped with input and perspectives that reflect the voices and perspectives from across the early learning system. Next slide, please. So next, we will walk through the feedback we received and how it shaped the rules we have before you today. So first, we heard concerns about the definition of the Governance Council having autonomous authority, particularly given the liability and accountability held by backbone entities. We heard there was a desire to reaffirm that the hub should function as a neutral, multi-sector decision-making body, and there was a strong emphasis on preserving the Governance Council's role as a space where decisions are made collaboratively, with the understanding that the backbone entity should not hold undue influence or disproportionate authority or power over regional investments. In response, we were able to make the following changes. The definition for Governance Council was changed to Governance Council having decision-making authority, meaning the ability of the Governance Council to make early learning hubs decisions independently. We clarified that the Governance Council has the authority to approve contracts or agreements, but that it can also delegate that responsibility to the backbone entities. DELC also added the ability for backbone entities to assign one representative to the Governance Council. We noted if the proposed representative is in a leadership position overseeing hub staff or backbone operations, they must not serve on the Governance Council. Backbone employees also may not serve as the chair or co-chair. And we also noted that DELC may allow exceptions through a review process, recognizing that hubs and backbone entities each have unique structures and compositions that we may need to be able to offer exceptions for. We also heard concerns about the requirement for governance councils to operate under bylaws, especially when backbones sometimes already had their own bylaws. So in response, Governance Council may now request to use an alternative governing document with DELC approval. Next slide, please.
We also heard an interest in clarifying that backbone entities must have a commitment to young children and families. And so in response, in the rules, we added a requirement that backbone entities, and I'll quote here, must be demonstrably committed to supporting young children and families. We also heard from RAC members that they felt the process for Governance Council initiating a backbone transition was too abrupt and missing some steps to address concerns. So we really heard that and added a few additional steps, including consultation with DELC about reasons for the need to change, the potential remedies or changes that address the lack of confidence, and DELC facilitation support with interested parties such as, Governance Council, Backbone, and Family Leadership Council. We also heard from RAC members that they wanted clarity on Governance Council membership, and they had suggestions for including a list of organizational representatives such as Head Start, EIECSE, Child Care Resource and Referral, for example. But our response was to refrain from including an exhaustive list in the rules. However, the rules are keeping sectors and key roles such as parent family representatives and tribal representatives included. Next slide. There was also a concern with locking in a set percentage for the matching fund requirement for all hubs. So to keep that, to prevent locking it in, we added a not to exceed 25% of the system coordination funds, and that allows for a change in percentage of match funds through grant agreements. We also heard the need for additional context and clarification about tribal engagement and consultation. So we added tribal engagement as a component of the framework for hubs under the purpose and scope rule and point to upcoming available department issued guidance. In addition, in the KPI rule, we included tribal nations when describing KPI investments to support successful transition into kindergarten. There was interest in more measurable language in the KPI rule, which listed reporting requirements. For example, how can we measure attitudes and behaviors? And so our response was to actually remove those reporting requirements to the grant agreement, as those requirements may change over time. Maria?
Next slide, please. So this really brings us to our last slide on feedback. We heard a strong request from RAC members to broaden the definition of priority populations. As a result, the definition now includes families of children with a disability, as well as families who have experienced historical trauma. We also heard there were several suggestions related to the term at risk, and we were actually able to remove this definition because upon closer look, the term was not actually included in the rule set. Next, we also heard concerns about the lack of coordinated enrollment language in the rules. That language was not added at this time because the work group was still active, and once those recommendations are finalized, that work will inform future rules, agreements, and other guidance, but it was not well suited for this rule set at this time. We also heard concerns were raised about requiring hubs to use DELC-approved data collection tools. Participants noted the importance of allowing flexibility beyond the DELC-provided tools, and in response to that, that requirement was removed to allow for greater flexibility. And finally, there were questions about the language asking for mapping of all funding streams. And in response to that, we added clarification where we are asking for specifically to map the hub funding streams. Next slide, please. We would love to take questions if there are any.
All right. Thank you, Nancy and Maria, for that overview and run through. So council, this is our opportunity to ask questions, make comments about these rules, observations. Many of us have been involved in the hubs for a decade, as long as the hubs have existed. So, any thoughts as we prepare to put a motion?
Just listening for the answer to, was it Dan Fishing that brought up the rules around the governance? There was just like, it sounded like a mistake in that. Is that addressed here? I was trying to like back on.
Yeah, I don't think it's a mistake. Or I was gonna answer that.
Go ahead,
Not a
Becky,
mistake,
thank
but
you.
like maybe a miss.
Yeah, so what Dan was referring to was that there's a provision, or there's a section that talks about leadership at a backbone not being able to have a seat on the governance council, and whether that would conflict with or prevent them from having the hub director. And so this is to specify that that hub directors are able to sit on the governance council. So that restriction would be for other backbone individuals beyond the hub director. So it shouldn't be an issue. Great, thank you. I'm sorry, I had trouble getting that.
Yeah, and I think I would just add to that in the Early Learning Hub governance structure rule, we do under 1A explicitly state the hub director is a member of the governance council and plays a vital role as a liaison. So we do make sure to make that distinction that whether they're a part of leadership or anything, they are a vital member of the Governance Council. So that is noted in the Early Learning Hub governance structure rule set under 1A.
Thank you. And I mean, I think first I just appreciate how much work went in and so much engagement and long process, but the right process. When you wait that long to review everything, to do such a thorough job is really incredible. And I hope that early learning hubs felt really valued along the way. So I just appreciate how much thought went into it.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Another piece of input that we had was from the High Desert ESD, which is the backbone, as you know, in Central Oregon. And they raised a few concerns, and what staff realized as we talked about it earlier is that this letter is dated June 11, and that was before the final version that we're all looking at today went out. So Gabby was in touch with the ESD, and they responded and said, yes, they realized most of their concerns are covered in the latest current version. So just to respond to that letter as well. I hadn't noticed the date, so that was pretty critical information. This has been a living document, as they say. For several months. Any other questions, comments? And I think maybe Nancy and Maria can respond to Robin's comment about the hubs feeling involved, included, listened to. Certainly that's the feedback I've had, but you guys are closer to them than I am.
I mean, I think that's the feedback that I've received as well. We started through the build process, and then it continued with our listening sessions. Many hub directors were on the rack, and I think through check-ins and all of the communication that we have with hub directors, while we didn't always see eye to eye on every piece, I think we listened and responded, and I hope that hub directors felt heard. I felt like the process was really thorough, and the level of engagement was so high, and I think that resonated with the hub directors. I hope.
I would agree.
Yeah, reflect that.
Right. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that throughout the process, we really were able to hear. I think we've come a really long way over the last year and a half of the work that we've been able to have at the hubs, and really have been rooted in trust as well, and being able to have ongoing check-ins, meetings, and opportunities for all of the involvement. I think this was really a group effort from everyone, from our DELC leadership to Early Learning Council, hub directors, and our amazing government affairs team. We just really had a lot of support throughout this process that I think is really reflected in the work that we were able to put out. And I think as difficult it is to find something that works for 16 different hubs, we were able to find that balance, I think. And I think we're really going to be able to support our hubs moving forward.
Yeah, great. Great. Well, if there are no other questions or comments, Peter, will you put a motion on the floor?
I move to adopt the proposed rule language amendments dated June 25, 2025, that adopted amendments to the Oregon Administrative Rules as listed on the council action request for the Early Learning Hub rule set amendments.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Liz. All right, any discussion of the motion? If not, those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And Ruby, I know you're virtual. Could you just raise your hand? Thank you.
That was a great one. Is Katie still on?
No, I want to acknowledge that Katie had to hop off. She had an emergency, but we do still have quorum, 8 out of 10
So that's it. Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Not? Folks have some new rules to play with.
Congratulations.
The timeline that was up earlier, that timeline is sort of in the miracle category. If you look at how many, I mean, most of these rules are brand new, right? And got rid of a lot of old things too. So state government can really move. Okay, good to know as we watch the chaos across the state. Stay in our own
We'll have to
lane.
remember that.
Fort Chelsea. Running back and forth across State Street. All right, let's move on to the second rule set, ERDC.
Agenda's on the call.
Employment-related daycare for who might be listening to.
All right, Jen, take it away.
Hi, Jen, welcome back.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jen Eras. I'm the Interim Child Care Assistance Program Manager at Department of Early Learning and Care, and here to present some rule changes for July 1. We have 12 different rules that had updates for July 1, and of those 12 rules, we really covered about 5 different topics. So we had to make some changes to adjust definitions and wording within our rule set to accommodate the new outdoor nature-based rule set. We also had to incorporate some changes for our expansion that came with House Bill 2386. I think that was a 23 legislative session. So that expanded ERDC to include a pathway for folks who are involved in child welfare to access ERDC. So we had to make those changes. And then we also had to add in some waitlist refresh functionality. So the rule language that we have currently prior to these draft rule language is it didn't allow for any refresh to be done of the ERDC waitlist. And prior to this implementation of the waitlist, we'd never had one implemented for more than a year. So we needed to do a little bit of catch up in how that waitlist is functioning. The other 2 small items we have some rule language that needed alignment between a provider who has an intentional program violation versus a provider who has received a subsidy suspension. So we aligned those rule languages, and then there was also one rule that just needed some cleanup. It was catch up from some changes that had been done previously for 12-month eligibility. So the specific rules, as you can see, we made changes to the definitions rules to accommodate outdoor nature-based programs for our ERDC waitlist. We added in functionality that allows us to remove people from the waitlist if they no longer want to remain on the waitlist. And then this third rule on here, this is where we started moving into the expanded child welfare. So we had to make several changes within the rule set to accommodate for the child welfare expansion. And I think we have more of this on the next page. So if you want to flip to the next slide. So the way that we like to talk about expanded child welfare is essentially saying that we have different pathways that families can take in order to access employment-related daycare, because the name really doesn't do it justice anymore. Families can be employed, and that's how they can access benefits. They can be attending school. They can be participating in the TANF Cash Assistance Program. And then this is essentially a 4th pathway. So this is for families who are engaged in different child welfare programs. They can actually access ERDC, and that is their qualifying activity, if you want to word it that way. We had some functionality in the system already for TANF participants where, again, TANF is their pathway to qualify for ERDC, but they would get their base authorization would be a part-time authorization of hours, and then they can essentially self-attest to a reason for needing additional hours. So we mirrored that functionality with our expanded child welfare population. We had to add some pieces in for self-attestation as far as some of the some of the eligibility requirements. So they have a little bit of a simplified application process as well, similar to the TANF pathway. And then also we had to make some changes to show that this was a way for a family to be essentially categorically eligible for ERDC, which I don't know that that is really as descriptive as saying it's a simplified application process. And if we'd like to move to the next slide. So with the child welfare population, one of the pieces that is very different and that is different from all the other pathways is within that legislation, it says that families are eligible regardless of their income. So we had to make changes to the rule set, essentially saying that their income is not countable against the program income limits. So that's what you see in this first rule listed here. We also had pieces where we had to add in information about essentially protecting the family's eligibility if they hadn't made a copay during that 12-month period, because federally we cannot close cases mid-certification for that reason. So we had to make sure that that was listed in here for both the TANF pathway and the expanded child welfare pathway. And then I believe this is the last, I want to say this is the last rule we had listed. This was our cleanup rule. So for reporting changes, we had some rule language saying that families were required to report changes within a 12-month period, but then we couldn't take action on them. And so it was really burdensome for families to be required to report something that didn't actually, wasn't actually needed by the agency. So we cleaned up that and took those requirements out of the rule section. I believe the next slide we should be getting into, oh no, we still have some additional ones. Okay, that's right, we swing back to outdoor nature base. So we had to adjust some of the requirements to essentially identify how outdoor nature-based programs would be paid by the system. So they are in alignment with certified center rates. And then we also had to make some changes, essentially saying that the outdoor nature-based providers would have to be in alignment with the licensing rules in order to be eligible to receive payment. And that's the same as what we have for other provider types as well. So this was just aligning with that current language that was listed. This is the last one here. So the rule that ends in 0085, this is a piece where, and I want to explain this a little bit, but where a provider with an intentional program violation, that is a very rare circumstance. Intentional program violations are essentially a status that comes through a fraud investigation. Most intentional program violations, therefore, 6 months or until it's typically tied to an overpayment. So 6 months or until an overpayment is repaid. In extremely egregious situations, there is a permanent intentional program violation status. So that's what we were addressing here. We had added subsidy suspension to the program. I want to say it was in about 2016, and that had much clearer language. Intentional program violations, since we have so few permanent intentional program violations that come through, we hadn't actually touched this language for over 10 years. So that's why we made some changes to align this language with what we already had in place for subsidy suspension. And I want to say, in my time with policy, so I joined policy back in 2011, I only recall 2 permanent intentional program violations that have ever come through. And those were extremely egregious. And so that's kind of setting the stage for what those changes were. We should, on the next slide, I think we'll get into some of our RAC participant information. So originally we had invited, I believe we had invited 12 participants to RAC. We did have some that had confirmed that they would be able to come, but they weren't able to. And then I believe we had one person that was having some technical difficulties and wasn't able to join. So we did have a good selection of folks across the state representing different areas of the state. We had several different providers and different provider types that were attending as well. We had participation from a community partner that had actually been a research analyst for childcare systems, and then we had childcare resource and referral that attended as well. Two of the people that were not able to make it were actually parents who had been participating in the ERDC subsidy program, so we were disappointed that they weren't able to attend, but we still had a very engaged RAC session. So we received a lot of feedback, and there was a lot of engagement and discussion about what the rule language covered. So we'll go into some of the concerns that were raised during the RAC session. So one of, sorry, just wanted to make sure, are there any questions so far? Okay. So one of the pieces that came up during the RAC session, and this was also something that we had heard from some advocacy groups when we initially were talking about a waitlist refresh, was the desire to have essentially flip how families would have to respond. So the wording that we have in this language says that a family has to, when we send out a notice saying we're going to refresh the wait list, they have to respond to us telling us they want to stay on the wait list. The suggestion that came out of the RAC session was asking only for families to contact us if they wanted to be removed from the wait list. We weren't able to accommodate this ask because in the process of making a selection from a wait list. So for families who are on that wait list or waiting for benefits, if they do get an invitation to apply for benefits, they do have to respond to the agency in order for that invitation to actually allow them to access benefits. So we need to make sure that the families we have on the wait list, they're getting information from us, they're responding to us and letting us know that they do want those benefits. So it does mirror the process that is required when families are actually invited off the wait list to apply. But we did make several changes to the process that is involved in that wait list refresh. So I'm not sure how familiar many of you were with the initial run through that we had on the wait list, but with the newer version, the revised version that we have, we've made accommodations to increase the response time frames. So initially it was only 1 month that families would have to respond and let us know. The current time frames are a little over 2.5 months. We've also built in additional communication. So during that time frame, we're not just sending one letter and waiting 2.5 months without trying to engage with families. We'll be sending out text messages about 2 weeks after the initial letter. A text message will go out to those who've opted into SMS texting, reminding them of the need to respond. And then about 1.5 months in, we'll send a second letter only to the families who hadn't responded. Again, reminding them that they need to respond if they want to keep their spot in the wait list. And then following that letter, about 2 weeks later, will be a second text message. So we have built in a lot more communication with the families based on the feedback that we received, as well as we're able to leverage some system work to get an actual note put on the family's case stating right at the very beginning that they are a family that needs to respond. So that gives a lot more clarity and insight for not only the ODHS staff who can see that case note, but also partners who have access into the one system. They will be able to view that case note as well. So that was probably one of the biggest areas where we spent time talking about the rules and some of the concerns, but there were other concerns that came up with some of the other pieces that we were changing. So
Jen,
oh, yes.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Oh, absolutely.
Because that is where a lot of the discussion has been focused. So it sounds as if the caseworker, the child welfare caseworkers are going to be a very critical part of this refresh and outreach. Is that correct?
This would be actually any ODHS staff with access to the one system. So that would primarily be on the self-sufficiency side rather than child welfare. But I mean, any staff member from front desk staff, people taking phone calls on the hotlines, they'll be able to see that and communicate with the family even before they actually receive their first letter. They'll be able, if they're talking to ODHS staff, they'll be able to talk to them about what they need to do to respond to the waitlist refresh request. And they'll
Okay,
also
so
be able
my-
to submit, oh, sorry.
My real focus is just that we need to understand, I think, that ODHS is an essential, integral, foundational part of making this refresh work.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so ODHS staff will be able to submit a response on behalf of parents. So it's not like the parent has to actually submit the response themselves. So that can be done not only with ODHS, but other partner staff can access that and submit a response on behalf of a parent.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And the box showing all of you is very tiny on my screen, so I can't see if anyone is moving to ask any other questions.
Any other questions on this slide, Sue?
No, no, thanks. I just wanted.
Yeah, okay. No more questions, Jen.
Okay. So the second piece where we received feedback was specific to that child welfare expansion. So for the expanded child welfare, we have 5 different populations where if families are participating, then they'll be able to qualify for it. And this includes foster parents, subsidized guardianship, family support services is another program through child welfare, as well as child abuse prevention and family reunification. So 5 very specific programs within child welfare. There was a concern that was raised that they wanted to make the definitions clearer, but then when we explained that these are actual programs, I think that alleviated some of the concerns because they didn't realize that it was specific program names for families participating in those programs who would be able to qualify for that expanded child welfare. And if we can go to the next slide. There was also a concern that was raised regarding some of our definitions that we had on verification requirements. And with that, we did have to walk through and explain that the verification requirements for 2 different populations. So again, we have the expanded child welfare and that categorical ERDC, which has historically just been the TANF population. They wanted us to combine those, but they had different requirements. And so we weren't able to combine them because the requirements were slightly different between the 2. So that was where some of the confusion came up, was thinking that we were trying to say the same thing in both, but it was worded differently. And so we were able to, talk through those concerns during the RAC session. And I believe the last piece was related to that intentional program violation. There were concerns about providers not having due process or there being a lack of transparency. So we walked through the process with them on what an intentional program violation looks like. For a provider to receive an intentional program violation, they actually have to walk through and sign a very specific form, and then there are hearing rights that are related to any actions like this, but both the temporary kind of short-term intentional program violation and the permanent have hearing rights that are tied to them as well. So when we walk through that process a little more, it seemed to alleviate some of the concerns. And again, this is something that we don't do very often. And so for providers, it's not something that they hear about often because it's not a common practice for us to go through an intentional program violation with a provider. Move to the next slide. So then that just brings us to our timelines. We seem to have the date on our vote on there incorrectly, but it should be today. And then these rules would go into effect for July 1st.
All right, thank you, Jen. Again, I feel as if you're a member of the council, but I know you aren't. You join us frequently, which we appreciate.
We have a lot of rules.
They aren't over today. So, council, questions of Jen, comments about the rules we are about to adopt?
I just wondered about the public comment. There was none on any of the ERDC rules. Could you explain what your public comment, what's that look like for this?
We did have a rather lengthy public comment that came from the AFSCME Provider Union, and it was regarding that first concern about wanting families to have to make the contact with the agency to ask to be removed from the wait list. So that was a primary area of concern. They did feel like that process would be the process that we've outlined is burdensome for families, and they raised concerns regarding the waitlist refresh, essentially lessening the number of families that are on the wait list. They felt like it was taking away from the perceived need for the program.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
have a comment or sort of a question. I think when I spent some time in the legislature talking to members about the ERDC waitlist, and one of the things that keeps coming back that I think, or I want to encourage the agency to think about, is it feels like that waitlist is still not accurately representing who's eligible, and it's really hard to advocate with lawmakers if you don't know what the universe actually looks like. And so I'm curious, I know we'll probably see drops in the wait list from families who don't respond or who opt to, to not continue. Is there are we anticipating that the number on this wait list is going to more accurately reflect who will actually be eligible once folks start coming off the wait list? Because I still think ultimately we need to actually know what that universe is to ask the legislature in future sessions to be able to address that need.
Yes, and that is a fabulous question, because this is a step in the right direction. It by no means is getting us to an accurate number of these are the families who will qualify for ERDC. I can talk about waitlist for a very long time, so I will try to just keep it more concise. But the waitlist functionality we have now was put in place back in 2010, and it was mirroring the Oregon Health Plan standard waitlist. It is not designed for the current ERDC program we have right now. We have had so many investments and expansions put into the program where it's serving families better. It's really a completely different program than it was back in 2010. This waitlist does not really work well with the program as it stands. So we have a lot of ideas on things that we can do to make changes. So not only the waitlist refresh is really kind of an end step. So we have people on the wait list. We're just checking back to make sure, yeah, you really do still want benefits. But the people on the wait list, there are essentially two buckets. There are families who didn't meet one of the bypasses, so they were just placed on the wait list. We don't have any other screening or eligibility criteria for families to be placed on that wait list. The other bucket are families who actually met a bypass, but they were denied ERDC benefits because they didn't meet eligibility. This is a much smaller population, but the intention when this wait list was created was saying, well, we'll give them another chance to apply later because circumstances can change so quickly. We didn't want to take away their right to be on a wait list because they didn't meet the criteria right now. But we are looking at that. That's a potential change we could make. We could say if people have been denied for a reason other than that bypass, then no, they wouldn't be able to go on the wait list. We're exploring all sorts of different options on how we can really make this better reflect which families would most likely be able to not only respond and come back and apply for benefits when they're invited, but also to qualify. So, we met with a couple different states to get their takes on managing long-term wait lists. So there are some states that have families complete the full application for benefits before they're even able to be put on the wait list. That has its issues, especially with federal requirements. So, but another state, it was actually Texas, they have a brief screening tool that they use. So it's not a full application. It's a shorter kind of touching the high points on eligibility, and families have to meet that screening to be placed on their wait list. And I think that would be a much smarter way to go. It would require some system work, and so we're kind of delving into that on what system work can be done that would be more of that short term, like it's a small change that we can get done within 6 months, or is it a large change that we have to put on the strategic roadmap between ODHS, OHA, and DELC on what the priorities are for the one system. I will cut it
All
off
right,
there.
I think it's
I couldn't talk for too long on that.
Ongoing conversation, council. Oh, wow. I'll miss that one. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments about this rule set? If not, Mr. Buckley.
I move to adopt the proposed rule language amendments dated June 25, 2025. That adopt amendments to the Oregon Administrative Rules as listed. The council action request for the employment-related daycare rule set amendments.
Thank you. Is there a second for that? I'll second. Thank you, Peg. All right, discussion of the motion on the floor. Hearing none, those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions. All right, you've got new rules, Jen.
Right, thank you all so much.
Thank you for your multiple presentations. Whoa, all right, council, good work. Rules done. I think the next thing on the agenda is adjourn. All right, well done, council. This meeting is adjourned.